Good morning. Thanks for tuning in. This morning I want to talk a little bit about the life of Joseph. I had the chance to teach on the life of Joseph at Christ Church of Oak Brook in their greenhouse, which is seniors. And just going back over the story of Joseph, which we covered here at West Hills last year, just an amazing study. I mean, he lived such an extraordinary life. Do you ever feel like you don't fit in? Do you ever feel like, I'd kind of like to be somewhere else? I feel that way sometimes. I think all of us do. I think some of us are homesick at times. So Joseph, when he's a teenager, gets sold into slavery. I mean, that's a pretty bad deal. But then he thrives in Potiphar's house, but then he's falsely accused and he gets thrown in prison. And when he's in there, while he's rotting away in there, he's succeeding there too. The warden pretty much gives him carte blanche. I mean, he gives him authority over all kinds of stuff. But then they forgot about him after he interpreted the dreams. They said, "Yeah, put in a good word for me." But then he interprets a dream and he goes from being a prisoner to a prime minister in one day. And he was there to really save all of Israel and to save Egypt. That was the purpose of his life. But I want to ask you something. Do you think he lived the dream? Is that the dream that do you think growing up he's like, I want to, marry a nice Egyptian girl? No, I'm sure he wanted to marry someone from where he was from. His life didn't go at all the way he wanted it to go. He had a final request in Genesis chapter 50, the final chapter of Genesis, verse 25. Do you know what he said? He said, "Someday we're getting out of here." It's like the old Animal song. We got to get out of this place if it's the last thing we ever do. And do you know what he said? "Carry my bones out of here." I never got to live in the promised land the way I wanted to as an adult. But someday we're going to get out of this place. And we're going to be where we really want to be. And you know, in the book of Exodus, it says that, think about it. In Exodus chapter 13, verse 19, they're in a rush, okay? It's the night of the Passover. I mean, they're eating food on the fly. They're not even bothering to have leavened bread. They don't have time to wait for that. I mean, I could go into all the details of that night. But you know the one thing that Moses said, we're not leaving without. We're not leaving Joseph's bones behind. Joseph's bones are going with us. And so they just took him right to the promised land. No, Moses never made it to the promised land. The Israelites wandered for 40 years in the desert. That means that Joe's bones were going all over the desert for 40 years in the wilderness. Moses didn't make it to the promised land. I'll come back to that in a moment. But then we find in the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 32, Joshua brings Joseph's bones into the promised land. It might take you a long time to get to where you really want to be. It might take you a long time to get you to where God really wants you to be. But God is fully capable of doing it. It says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22, "It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left." What a statement of faith. What kind of statement of faith can you give to the next generation? It might have nothing to do with your bones, but your life can speak to others even after you're gone. There's all sorts of different reminders that we can leave behind and say, when this happens, do this. When this happens, remember me. And some people might say, that's never going to happen. But if you have the faith and that's the answer to your prayers, go for it. I want to say one final thing about Moses that always seemed kind of got the short end of the stick. He didn't get to the promised land, but that's between him and God. But do you know, just a little while before Jesus was crucified and resurrected, he brought Peter and James and John with him, and he said, I want to go up here on this mountaintop. And do you know who showed up on that mountaintop? He says to Peter, James, and John, yeah, meet Moses and Elijah. And so they're having this chat up there. Never dawned on you? Moses got to the promised land. But that was in the promised land, and he got somewhere far better than that. I don't know where you're at in your story, and you might be very dissatisfied with where you're at right now. But God wants to bring a fantastic conclusion to your story. Don't doubt it. And have the confidence that He'll do it for you. God bless you. Have a great week.